The hum of distant alarms shattered the stillness of space, cutting through the otherwise serene blackness. The Federation has failed. Commander Cale Desmond's voice crackled across the transmission, his words a ghostly echo in the cold void. This is the last transmission of the Icarus. Humanity is lost. We leave behind our legacy, and with it, our hope. The message abruptly cut out, swallowed by the vast emptiness of the universe, leaving behind nothing but the dying whine of a failing signal. Desmond slumped in his chair, his fingers hovering over the console of the Icarus, his once proud flagship now reduced to an abandoned relic drifting towards oblivion. Around him, his crew was silent. Some had died in the battle, others were scattered, lost in the vastness of space. He stared out the viewing port at the distant remnants of Earth, now little more than a barren rock, its atmosphere gone, civilization erased. His comms officer, Lieutenant Arden Kor, swallowed hard. "Commander, what now?" His voice wavered, a rare break in his usual composure. Desmond didn't reply immediately. The weight of the question, of their last stand, hung heavily in the air. "We prepare for the end," Desmond said, his voice cold, distant. He wasn't sure if he spoke to Kor or to himself. The Valkyrie Empire had crushed their fleet, had wiped humanity from the stars. Their advanced weaponry had decimated Earth's defenses, eradicating cities, civilizations, and finally the Federation itself. Yet Desmond wasn't ready to surrender. "I'll send a final message to the galaxy," he said, breaking the silence. His fingers danced over the console, inputting the coordinates of a final transmission. His message would carry their legacy, a hope that, someday, someone would remember humanity's bravery. That some trace of them would survive. Hundreds of light years away, the Herald drifted silently through the dark expanse of space. Captain Serena Voss, the last of humanity's elite strategists, sat at the helm, eyes narrowed in concentration. She stared at the encrypted message she had intercepted, her pulse quickening as the details unfolded on her screen. A hidden archive, long thought destroyed, had provided the key. Desmond's final transmission, pieced together by an underground network of human rebels, had found its way to her. The message had been faint, but clear enough to decode. Humanity is lost. But we leave behind our legacy. Serena clenched her jaw. Her crew of survivors, scattered, uncertain, and weary, deserved more than a dying legacy. They needed a cause, a reason to fight. The galaxy had forgotten them, but she wouldn't allow humanity to be erased so easily. "Prepare the crew," she ordered, her voice cutting through the tension. "We have to find it, the Aegis. It's the only hope we have." Her first officer, Lieutenant Vile, appeared from the shadows, his expression grim. "Are we really doing this, Serena? Chasing after a ghost?" Serena fixed him with a piercing gaze. "We're not chasing ghosts. We're reclaiming what's ours." Her voice was firm, her words carrying the weight of 1,000 unspoken promises. Humanity's spirit hadn't died, it had been smothered. And she was going to reignite it. She turned to the holomap, fingers hovering above the stars. The Aegis, a relic of the Federation's once mighty fleet, lost during humanity's final battle against the Valkyrie, had been located in an uncharted system. It was a chance, a slim one, but it was all they had left. The ship was believed to be a treasure trove of human technology, weaponry, and knowledge. If they could find it, Serena knew they could spark a rebellion strong enough to challenge the Empire. Meanwhile, in the deep reaches of Valkyrie space, Emperor Torvith stood on his observation deck, gazing out at the endless stars. The galaxy was his. Humanity, a dying memory. Their resistance had faltered. The Federation had been crushed. There was nothing left but the ashes of a failed civilization. Yet there was something about the message Desmond had left behind, something that stirred something deep within him. He had ordered its analysis, and the results were unsettling. A remnant of humanity's fleet still existed, hidden among the stars. He could feel it, a faint pulse in the darkness, a threat that lingered. Perhaps they had not all perished. "Track it," Torvith commanded, his voice cold and calculating. "We cannot allow any trace of humanity's spirit to remain." The Valkyrie Empire, vast and powerful, had nearly wiped out humanity. But if there were any remnants left, if there was even a shred of their technology or resolve, they would find it. And they would crush it before it could rise again. Back aboard the Herald, sWrath felt the weight of the decision on her shoulders. She had given everything for this cause, her family, her reputation, even her heart. Humanity had been broken, scattered across the stars, but not forgotten. Not by her. "We'll find the Aegis," she whispered to herself, her fingers gripping the armrests of her command chair. "We'll make them remember." The stars outside the Herald's viewport seemed to shimmer with possibilities, an infinite expanse that stretched out before them. It was a terrifying unknown, but sWrath felt something stir within her, a quiet certainty. The galaxy might have thought humanity was lost. But they would see. She glanced at her crew, who stood in silent anticipation. Their eyes were filled with uncertainty, but there was something else there too, a flicker of hope. "We're going to take back our place," she said, her voice steady. "And we'll show the galaxy what it means to challenge humanity." With that, the Herald surged forward, cutting through the darkness as the first chapter of humanity's resurgence began. The Herald drifted silently through the uncharted void, its crew a mixture of weary soldiers, survivors, and refugees. The cold darkness outside was suffocating, yet inside the ship, the tension was even thicker. sWrath stood at the helm, her fingers lightly grazing the controls as the distant stars stretched out before her like a map of forgotten paths. "Are you sure about this, Captain?" Lieutenant Vile's voice came from behind her, low but sharp. He'd been her right hand for years, but the edge in his voice told her how deeply uncertain this mission had unsettled him. sWrath didn't look away from the view. "I'm sure," she said, her voice steady. "We have to find the Aegis. We can't just wait around for the Valkyrie to finish what they started." Vile stepped forward, his boots echoing softly against the metal deck. His face was hard, but his eyes, dark, searching, betrayed his concern. "I've seen enough of humanity's hope turn to dust. The Aegis, it's been lost for decades, Captain. You're gambling with what little we have left." "For what?" "For something better," sWrath replied, her tone unwavering. "We're not just chasing ghosts, Vile. We're trying to reclaim what was stolen from us." Her words hung in the air between them, unspoken doubts lingering in the dimly lit bridge. The Herald had been on a quiet, relentless pursuit for weeks, its engines pushed to their limits as they traced the coordinates from the fragments of Desmond's final transmission. They were close now, too close for comfort, in fact. "Set course for the Aegis coordinates," sWrath ordered, her voice firm. "Coordinates locked in," Vile said, eyes on his console. He didn't argue further, but sWrath could see the skepticism etched into his posture. The ship's engines hummed to life, vibrating through the floor beneath them as the stars blurred into streaks of light. sWrath pressed her palms flat against the console, her thoughts a turbulent storm. She didn't want to admit it, but every moment that passed felt like they were teetering on the edge of a precipice. The Aegis was a beacon of hope, or perhaps a tombstone marking the end of humanity's legacy. Hours later, as the Herald closed in on the coordinates, the crew gathered on the lower deck. sWrath stood before them, eyes scanning each face, searching for the strength they all needed to believe. The mission was about to become real, and despite the risks, she had never been more certain that they had no other choice. "Everyone," she began, her voice cutting through the room, "this is it. We find the Aegis today. It's humanity's last relic. If we're going to survive, this ship might be our only chance to turn the tide. So I'm asking you now, are you ready?" The silence that followed was deafening. The tension in the room crackled, every person questioning the reality of what they were about to do. Then, slowly, one by one, they nodded. Vile, his jaw tight, stepped forward. "We follow you, Captain. But we all know what we're up against. The Valkyrie will be looking for the ship too, and if they find it first..." "We'll be ready for them," sWrath interrupted, her voice like iron. "The Herald may be small, but we have the advantage of surprise. Humanity's greatest weapon is its resilience. We'll prove that today." The crew's resolve hardened in the wake of her words. They may have been a scattered remnant of what was once a mighty force, but they were still human, and that had always been their greatest strength. The Herald drifted into the system where the Aegis was rumored to be. There was no sign of the massive warship at first, nothing but the empty expanse of space stretching endlessly in every direction. But then, as the ship moved deeper into the system, a faint signal began to pulse through the dark. Weak. Distant. But it was there. Serena's heart skipped a beat. There, she whispered. It's there. Vile stepped beside her, his eyes narrowing. It's not much, but it's enough. He hesitated, then added, Captain, there's something strange about the signal. It's coming from a wreck. Not a full ship, but fragments. The knot in Serena's stomach tightened. She knew it was unlikely that the Aegis would be in one piece, but hearing it confirmed still hit harder than she expected. The Aegis had been humanity's last hope, their final weapon in the war against the Valkyrie. If it was truly destroyed, broken, scattered, it would mark the end of everything. But she had no choice. Prepare boarding teams, she said, her voice firm. We're going in. The Herald dropped out of hyperspace just outside the wreckage. The remnants of the Aegis were spread out across a vast debris field, shattered fragments of hull plating and twisted metal floating aimlessly in the cold of space. The sheer scale of the destruction was overwhelming. Serena's chest tightened as she stared at the ruins of what had once been the pride of humanity's fleet. A soft beep echoed from the console. Captain, Vile said, his voice low, there's something moving. Serena turned to him sharply. What do you mean, moving? Not a ship. Not a fleet, he said, his fingers dancing across his screen. Something on the wreckage. It's too small to be a Valkyrie ship, but it's definitely not human. The hairs on the back of Serena's neck stood up. Weapons on standby, she ordered, her mind racing. She wasn't just hunting for the Aegis anymore. There was something else here. Something, or someone, that had been waiting for them. The wreckage of the Aegis loomed ahead like the remnants of a fallen titan, its broken hull scattered across the barren expanse of space. Serena Voss stood at the bridge of the Herald, her sharp eyes fixed on the debris field that stretched out before them. Every fiber of her being screamed that something was wrong. The odd sense of unease gnawed at her, an instinct telling her that they weren't alone. Status report, she barked, her voice a tight command. Vile, standing beside her, was already scanning the sensors. His brow furrowed as his fingers danced across his console. There's no sign of any Valkyrie ships, Captain, but the debris, it's not just scattered. There's a pattern to it. Pattern? Serena's voice cut through the air, a hint of skepticism in her tone. What do you mean? Vile tapped a few more commands, zooming in on a section of the wreckage. A holographic image flickered to life, showing debris arranged in tight, strategic clusters. The pattern was unmistakable. It's like someone intentionally pushed the pieces this way. Whoever, or whatever, was here, wasn't just scavenging. They were hiding something. Serena's gut tightened. She glanced at the viewing port, the distant remains of the Aegis seeming to pulse with a foreboding energy. The message from the wreckage was clear, they were walking into a trap. But there was no turning back now. Not after everything they'd been through. We're going in, she said, her voice cold, decisive. Prepare the boarding teams. Vile, you're with me. Hours later, the Herald settled into a stable orbit around the wreckage. Serena stood in the command center of the boarding vessel, her armor gleaming under the harsh lights, every piece of equipment checked and double-checked. Her mind was clear, but her pulse was quickening. This mission could make or break them. The Aegis held the key to their survival, and so much more. But the closer they got, the more she sensed that the galaxy's past might not be as forgotten as they had believed. Vile's voice crackled over the comms, pulling her from her thoughts. Captain, we're ready to launch. Boarding teams are in position. Serena nodded, taking a deep breath before giving the order. Execute. The boarding craft detached from the Herald, its engines firing to propel it toward the wreckage of the Aegis. The ride was a shaky one, turbulence shaking the hull as they maneuvered through the debris field. Serena's eyes never left the wreckage, her hand gripping the armrest with white-knuckled tension. As the wreck loomed closer, Serena's senses went on high alert. The lights flickered inside the boarding craft, and the hull groaned under the strain of their approach. For a moment, she thought she saw a shadow pass across the massive fragments of the Aegis, but when she blinked, it was gone. "Captain," Vile's voice came through again, softer this time, tinged with uncertainty. "I'm not sure about this. The wreckage, it doesn't feel right." "I know," she replied, her jaw tight. "But we need to find out what's here. For the crew. For humanity." The boarding craft settled onto the largest piece of the Aegis's shattered hull with a muted thud, and the ramp lowered with a soft hiss. Serena led the way, her boots clanking against the metal surface. The air was cold, sterile, a ghost of a once-active ship. But there was no time to waste on hesitation. They had a mission to complete. The boarding team fanned out, weapons drawn, scanning the wreckage for any signs of movement. The silence was overwhelming. It felt like the whole galaxy had abandoned this place. Still, the tension in the air was palpable, as if something, someone, was watching them. Serena's boots crunched against the brittle, twisted remnants of the hull as they made their way deeper into the wreckage. The corridors, though mostly intact, were dim and lifeless, their walls charred and bent. Some of the control panels still buzzed faintly, the faint glow of malfunctioning lights casting eerie shadows along the dark passageways. "Clear," Vile called from the hallway ahead, his voice a whisper in the stillness. "Keep moving," Serena ordered, her heart racing in her chest. They reached a central chamber, where most of the Aegis's main systems had been concentrated. A cold shiver ran down Serena's spine as she saw it, a set of doors that had once been sealed tight, now cracked open just enough to reveal the faint glow of emergency lighting within. She stepped forward cautiously, her hand hovering near the weapon at her side. Something about this felt wrong, wrong in a way that made the hairs on the back of her neck stand on end. The doors creaked open. What lay inside was not what Serena had expected. The room was eerily pristine, as though untouched by the carnage that surrounded them. In the center, a massive holographic display flickered weakly. Its projection revealed a figure standing in the midst of a control console, staring intently at the data stream. The figure was human, but unlike any human she had ever seen. Their face was covered by a visor, their form dressed in advanced armor that mirrored the Federation's, but far more intricate, far more alien in its design. Serena's breath caught in her throat. The figure turned, and in that instant, their eyes, glowing faintly beneath the visor, met hers. A voice, distorted but unmistakably human, echoed through the room. "You shouldn't have come." The figure before Serena stood as still as a statue, its glowing eyes locked onto hers. Time seemed to slow, the eerie silence pressing in around her like a suffocating fog. Her breath caught in her throat. The sudden revelation hit her with the force of a physical blow. This was no ordinary survivor. This person, this being, was far beyond anything she had imagined. "Who are you?" Serena asked, her voice steady despite the storm raging inside her. She was no stranger to danger, but the presence before her was something new, something alien to everything humanity had faced before. The figure's voice, distorted by the helmet, came again, more chilling this time. "I was the Aegis," it said, its tone laced with a deep, unsettling calm. "I was humanity's last hope, or its final mistake." A surge of confusion mixed with dread tightened in Serena's chest. "What are you talking about?" she demanded. "You're human, aren't you?" The figure tilted its head, the faint glow beneath the visor flickering. "Humanity, evolved beyond your understanding. You think your species was lost, but in truth, it was transcended." A flash of anger ignited in Serena. "Transcended? You think humanity ascended because we lost everything? We've been fighting for our survival, dying for every inch of ground, and you—" "We were chosen," the figure interrupted, its voice now a hiss. "You and your kind, you fought because you didn't know. We were the ones who carried the weight of your world on our backs. The Aegis was meant to guide humanity, not just protect it. But we failed. Selena's mind raced as she tried to process the words. This wasn't just another survivor. This was a relic of something long lost, a piece of the myth of humanity's evolution. But it didn't make sense. You failed, she echoed, her voice incredulous. How? What happened to the Aegis? The figure stepped forward, its heavy boots clanking on the metallic floor. The Valkyrie, it murmured, the name laced with contempt. They didn't just seek to conquer. They wanted to erase everything. Everything humanity once was. The Aegis was supposed to protect your kind, but we were betrayed. The Aegis was sabotaged from within, and now, it trailed off, as if the very thought was too painful to continue. Vile stepped forward, his voice cutting through the tension. So this isn't some ancient weapon we can use to fight the Valkyrie? We've been risking everything for nothing? No, the figure said, its voice sharp, as though the suggestion offended it. The Aegis is more than a weapon, it is the culmination of humanity's potential. But it is also a warning. The room grew colder. Serena felt the weight of the figure's words press down on her like a physical force. This was bigger than a simple war or a battle for survival. This was about the very essence of who they were, or who they could have been. Suddenly, the figure's shoulders squared, and it raised its hands. Serena's instincts screamed at her to act, to fight, but something held her back. You can't stop what is already happening, the figure said, a deep sadness underlying the words. But there is still a chance, a small chance, for humanity to rise again. Not by repeating the past, but by embracing what you've always had, your spirit. Then tell me what to do, Serena spat, her voice laced with desperation. Tell me how to fix this. The figure didn't answer immediately. Instead, it looked at her, truly looked at her, the glowing eyes behind the visor seemingly searching for something deep within her. You are the answer, it said, its voice almost a whisper. You must make a choice, destroy what remains of the past, or embrace it. Only you can decide what comes next. A heavy silence settled over the room, the weight of the decision pressing on Serena's chest like a vice. The Aegis had once represented humanity's greatest hope, now it was a remnant of what they could never become. But the figure's words had opened a door to something more. Something beyond the cycle of war and destruction. The moment stretched, endless and fragile. Serena's gaze flicked to her crew, standing tense and ready. She could feel the same uncertainty running through them, the same burning question, what now? Vile was the first to speak, his voice barely above a whisper. Captain, we don't have time for this. The Valkyrie. No, Serena said firmly, cutting him off. Her eyes locked onto the figure once more. You're right. We can't keep fighting the same war. We need to move forward. The figure's shoulders relaxed, a faint hum vibrating through the air as the weight of its presence seemed to lessen. Then the first step is yours, it said softly. Embrace what humanity was meant to be. You are not just survivors. You are the inheritors of the future. Serena's chest tightened. The weight of those words was almost too much to bear. But in that moment, she understood. The Aegis wasn't their weapon. It was their lesson. And now, it was their time to write the next chapter. With one last glance at the shattered remains of the Aegis, Serena turned to her crew. The battle was far from over, but now, they had something far more valuable than any weapon, purpose. We move forward, she said, her voice clear and resolute. And this time, we do it on our terms. The Herald's engines powered up, the ship cutting through the debris field and into the vast unknown, the stars beckoning them toward a future they would forge themselves. Humanity had been lost, but no longer. The galaxy would feel the weight of their return.